Welcome, Angard.
Thank you.
The 3 Ps, payments, payments, and payments, as I see everybody rushing through the door. Now, we're going to cover a few issues today. Maybe just to start off, maybe give us a sense of how your role at Xero has changed. I think you've been there for almost 5 years now. How has your role changed over time, and equally, how has Xero changed in that 5 years?
Sure. So I started in the strategy function. I came from Deloitte. I was a strategy consultant for a long time, ran their strategy team, their corporate venture arm. And then 2 years into that journey, we had a new CEO. I joined as the Chief Strategy Officer, and then more recently took on also the role of the Managing Director for Australia and New Zealand. And, it's in the public. We launched our new strategy about 2 years ago. And a big focus for us was driving focus. So if you have seen any of our materials, you will see we talk about 3 major markets for us, 3 major jobs we're trying to do. And it was really important for anyone that's building a tech business. Focus is key because you can't win in every segment. And as you scale, sure, you will expand, but we had probably expanded a bit too quickly into too many countries and into too many problems we were trying to solve for small businesses. So right now it's a lot of laser focus, driving a lot of execution, and the 3 things we care about most.
Do you, on that point about laser focus, is that a reflection of how small businesses think? They're more focused on very much day-to-day mechanics, reaching new customers, making greater efficiency. Is it a reflection of where Xero is going, or is it more of a reflection of like, this is how we can better serve our customer segment?
Well, I think it's both. So to serve that customer segment, which is small and time poor, you need to make sure that what you build is highly native and embedded for them. Right? So if you take, we've just recently launched a range of new AI features, who hasn't? But what's quite important for us is to make sure, if you're a small business, you don't have time to go learn how to prompt. Like, you can't sit there all day long and saying, like, what's the right thing I should ask an agent to automate my workflow for me? And so when we think about AI, for us, it's very much about how do you embed it into the workflow for a small business who is trying to run their business, not trying to sit in their accounting platform transparently. So I think for us, and to do that well, then you need to do a few things really well. And you need to think about the workflow, not just the screen and the job that needs to be done.
And you mentioned 3 markets. What are those 3 markets? I'm assuming it's Australia, New Zealand, and is there one more?
It's Australia, the UK, and the US.
Okay, not New Zealand. Okay.
Yeah, and so New Zealand is obviously our heritage market. We're founded there, we're headquartered there. But naturally, when you're trying to think about global scale, those are the 3 markets we deem that continue to have great, huge potential for us. And the 3 jobs are around accounting, payments, and payroll. And there is a benefit that, of course, not the same country, but New Zealand and Australia do share a lot of similarities in the way that accountants and bookkeepers work, small businesses work, and some of the regulatory environment.
I might just stick with New Zealand for just a quick second. Obviously, Xero is an amazing success story that's come from New Zealand. Now ASX listed, you're sort of closing in on 5 million users. What are the different economic conditions at play between Australia and New Zealand? You see many Australian businesses immediately try and scale globally, access the Asian market. I guess it's slightly different in New Zealand. Are there different challenges between the 2 markets, and is there a different sort of small business sentiment around?
Well, I think that the thing that's consistent, and New Zealand is smaller, is that it's a small market, which means, we did an event a few months ago in New Zealand with some of our top partners, and we were lucky enough to get Rod, the founder, on stage, and you ask him the question, why did you go global from day one? And his answer is very simple, which is like, someone has to. But the reality is, of the population size that they are, that drive allowed him to go to Australia very quickly, then the UK, then the US, and you have to, because if you're going to go take over the world, you're not going to do it only serving the New Zealand market. But the similarities in terms of the economic conditions, of course, more recently, New Zealand has just come out of a recession. So it's a tougher environment, but also what we see is, therefore, platforms like Xero become critical because it's the thing they still need to run their business, no matter how slow or fast they're growing.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to our first P of people. How important or how critical has people been to the Xero success story?
Yeah, I mean, how many people would go list on the New Zealand Stock Exchange with little to no revenue? Someone in New Zealand. That was like, Rod went very early. And for anyone that follows the Shopify story, Toby Ludkett talks about, like, you're away from the epicenter. And so it allows you to make a set of decisions, and it makes you think very differently. And so when you're Rod sitting in New Zealand trying to say, I've got a global vision to go change the way accounting and bookkeeping should be done for small businesses, you're going to think a lot bigger. We are also the beneficiary of having very good talent in Australia and New Zealand, engineering talent at a different cost base. We don't have to, in the early days, go compete with San Francisco salaries. Now, of course, as you scale and you need different skill sets, we have brought on more talent from that part of the world. But for us to be able to scale for a long period of time, we have relied on amazing talent. Some of our top AI talent still sits in Melbourne. And so the benefit of being that global company and having access to talent in Australia and New Zealand is that we can get the best from anywhere in the world, and it allows us to scale more effectively.
Just that point on engineering talent, that is often not a message that people would associate with Australia, of having good engineering talent. In fact, it's something that Stripe is currently looking at, is bringing more local engineering talent into our Australian team. Why do you think that message doesn't get out there, that Australia is so readily associated with good talent in this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you, but I'm personally quite passionate about changing that. I think the reality is that it is there, and actually some of our US colleagues would tell you some of the best engineering talent sitting in San Francisco is from Australia. And so it's upon us to make sure that the conditions for them to succeed actually exist in Australia, because if they don't, they will go elsewhere. But I think it's upon companies like Xero, we're going to take a more active role in trying to make sure that we celebrate it, tell people about it, and hopefully retain more great talent.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an onus on many participants across the ecosystem to do a better job, not just selling the message of engineering, but also selling that sort of wider tech confidence message. Just sort of pivoting towards small business a little bit. Obviously, issues like cost and confidence and time are critical for these small businesses. From Xero's perspective, how do you really ingrain in their operations that Xero is, a productivity enhancer, that you're helping them drive efficiency, that you're helping them deliver their outcomes and meeting their customer needs?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to thinking about the end-to-end workflow. So you have to think about the whole experience for a small business customer, and are you able to take jobs out that they don't want to do? No one that starts a small business is excited about it doing bank reconciliation. No one that starts a small business is excited about taking their banking data, feeding it into a ledger of some sort, and making sure it's correct. And so we think very, very carefully about making sure that the thing that we are doing is built in a way that essentially we're removing tasks, removing time, and giving them time to do what they need to do, which is run their small business. And of course, we work very closely with accountants and bookkeepers who serve. Australia is a bit of a unique market. I think over 90% of small businesses will use an accountant and bookkeeper. Most other markets, that's not true. New Zealand's not like that. The US and the UK are not like that. And so when we think about building those products, we think about both those users, and both those users want to spend more time either, if you're an accountant and bookkeeper, serving a small business and advising them, and if you're a small business, it's to go do what you love.
Yeah, I think that's the same with payments, and obviously I think it probably speaks to the partnership that Xero and Stripe have. Businesses don't want to think about payments. It's complex, it's technical, you have to navigate lots of different components, and I think particularly if you're a small business, you want to be able to navigate that quite seamlessly, and I think that obviously speaks to the strength that Xero has.
And a good example is we talk, e-invoicing as an example is a trend that's been around for a while, but taking a little bit more steam at the moment in both Australia and New Zealand. But a small business doesn't care whether it's an e-invoice technology or just an invoice, right? They want to get invoiced, collect cash, and run their business. And so it's important for any tech company to remember that you're trying to solve a customer problem. You're not trying to build great tech.
Why has there not been more progress on e-invoicing?
I think it comes down to we're the beneficiary of regulatory tailwinds. We talk about a lot at Xero. And I would say the Australian government has done some things exceptionally well. With the privilege of having the Chief Strategy Officer role, looking at other markets around the world, we just did one of our large acquisitions in the US. Their primary problem they're solving is checks eliminated. We haven't had checks in a long time in this country. But what we have had the foresight for a period of time is to digitize a lot of things. And so when the government put single-touch payroll in, although it would have been painful in the process of adopting it, it meant that during COVID, people were able to get paid seamlessly. And so there are situations where we've done that extremely well, and the government has either mandated or supported it in different ways, and I'd say e-invoicing is one area that the vision is a great vision, but the strategy and the execution still needs work.
Who would have thought government would fail at execution? Not me. Is there a particular jurisdiction you look at that Xero's not active in that you say they've done this well?
For e-invoicing?
Yeah.
I would say it's really taking off quite a bit in Europe at the moment. But again, it's government driven.
Yeah.
It is mandated. They are imposing it, but giving small businesses and businesses time to adopt it, but explaining the benefits and the rationale, but leading from the front.
Yeah. Do you think it is a silver bullet for small business in terms of one of the big rocks that you would solve for them?
Again, I think it comes back to, it's not about giving them e-invoicing. It's what problem are we solving?
Yeah.
And if it means that it's simplifying the fact that you no longer have to take all the metadata that's in an invoice, that's digital or PDF, and it's instantly there, and you can create a network, reduce fraud, that's the thing that they care about. They don't care about e-invoicing.
Yeah. Just how important do you think it is for a small business to adopt a platform or to look at some of these workflow issues to manage their business in totality?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, as you scale as a small business, you're going to care about different things. So when you start, you're going to want to make sure you're compliant. You might not have many staff, if any. You don't have much workflow. It is you and the business or your accountant and bookkeeper. But obviously, as you scale, if you've got employees, if you've got bills to pay, if you've got cash to manage, the more complex you are, the more workflow you have. And again, if you're running a small business, if everyone's run one, if you're a FinTech in the audience, you're a small business, you have other more important things to do, which is how I'm going to go drive revenue and manage my cost base than to go pass information through your business.
Yeah. Are you seeing more broadly in Australia and elsewhere, small businesses adopt workflow sooner in their business journey? As in, like, you might be a small business and you start out and you just focused on getting customers and selling your product, and you're not too focused on workflow or platforms. But then you're 12 months in, you're like, oh, this is just too much for me. I need a platform to solve this problem, and they then go to a Xero or a Stripe or elsewhere.
Yeah, I think different markets are, I would say we're a fairly mature market that I think people have, and again, I think the obsession with accountants and bookkeepers in Australia is different, which means I think people more quickly want to get established, try and get established well earlier on. But I would say in markets like the US, that's very different. They will try and DIY it for as long as possible, probably, which means it does create challenges for them later. But often we find that we do get customers that have been around for probably a little longer before they realise, hey, I really need to formalise my books and get things in order.
Yeah. How many, I think it was one of your recent reports said that about 15 or 16% of businesses on the Xero platform global. How does Xero sort of help businesses access new markets?
Yeah, it was, so 17% of Australian small businesses that we did a study on said, hey, we are not looking to go global. So we have plenty of global businesses on Xero, but I'd say that one of the reasons is, one, we did the study during the trade wars, so I'm sure it had a bit of an impact. But two, it's already hard enough to make sure you comply with the regulation in one market. It takes a whole lot of guts to go decide I want to do that in multiple countries. But obviously, platforms like yours, ours, once you're on it, we are in many, many countries. And so if you already know how to run your books on Xero, if you're going to the US, you can set up another entity, you're familiar with it. And so, again, having that platform helps us help small businesses scale because there's a level of familiarity and understanding of how they can run their business on the same platform, despite what jurisdiction they're in.
And the businesses that you speak to, you mentioned US being a priority market for Xero. Do you see businesses going to the US and the UK, or is now there more of an interest in going to Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think it's. I think everyone always gets attracted to the US very, very quickly, for obvious reasons. I would say for our country and our government, it'd be wise to think about how they do make it easier to go to the next largest economies that are coming.
Yeah, I think it's probably especially the case of fintechs who are looking to scale up. Obviously, the US makes sense. Obviously, from a Stripe perspective, we see far more diversity in where merchants go. Many of them want to access Southeast Asia purely for proximity purposes. Maybe just shifting to policy quickly. How important do you see things like digital ID or CDR's been talked about a fair bit today? How important do you see some of these government initiatives for not only for Xero as a platform, but also for small businesses?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the comment I made around execution. So I think it's only as good as easy as they make it for small businesses. We obviously think if more data can flow across the small business economy, that's a good thing. But right now, the way CDR is being implemented means it's actually pretty hard to get onto it. And so it's a great example of where if you spend a lot of money and a lot of time, but don't get the right things that matter for the people that have to actually adopt the technology to get onto it, it can become a bit of a wasted investment. We see, obviously, in the UK where open banking has been more successful, we're beneficiaries of it. Our small business customers are beneficiaries of it. I'm sure with your experience you've seen that. So I think if done well, it can unlock potential.
Yeah.
But right now, there's a few sticking blocks.
What do you see as the difference between the UK and the Australian experience? Has it been greater merchant demand or just better by design?
Just better by design.
Yeah.
Which leads to better demand.
Yeah. I think if people had their time again, they would have designed the CDR a little bit differently. But anyway, alas.
Well, you've seen both markets. What would your view be?
Yeah, definitely the UK. I think the problem with Australia is that it got too deep into the design and didn't follow where the merchant demand was. In the UK, it very much led with a merchant-first approach that said, okay, here are some very obvious use cases around energy, telco and banks. Let's roll out those first and then see where the regulation can fit around that. I feel like the Australian experience is very much like, let's develop a regulatory framework and see where everything fits together. And it's just created a whole degree of friction. And, look, even now from a Stripe point of view, we've got a product called Financial Connections, which is an open banking product. We'd love to bring it to Australia and give it to our merchants and users, but there's too much compliance involved to bring that here now. It's something we hopefully will bring it in time. But anyway, discussion for another day. Similar topic. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around the RBA's work on merchant fees and surcharging. I'm assuming that's an important topic for small businesses in particular. Have you had any discussions with your users around that, or how have you been reflecting on that topic?
Yeah, not so much with our users right now. I think it's because it's evolving. I think like any regulatory change, we would urge the government to always just think about the overall ecosystem. So it's very easy to think about the large players and are they extracting too much rent through surcharges, whatever it might be. But the reality is that if you're a small business, you might be relying on that surcharge to also fund the cost and the thin margins you have if you run a cafe, for example. So different industries have different impacts. We see the same thing with when Scope 3 emissions became mandatory for large companies to report. That means the burden actually falls on small businesses. Now they have to work out how they're going to report if they serve a large business. And so I think the most important thing is as policies change or get implemented, you've got to equally think about small business, not as an afterthought and not only at the top end of town.
Yeah, it's a very challenging policy to navigate because of that exact impact. Obviously, many small businesses rely on surcharging. They're going to lose that. The RBA anticipates that they'll get a recoup through an interchange reduction, but whether that's passed on or how that would be realised. Would you like to see particular policies in this area have, be fragmented in such a way that there's just a small business policy and then there's a larger business policy? Do you think that sort of setting would work?
I think probably two different ways you can approach it. One is just more actively engage small business industry before you design the policy. So that's one approach. The second would be if you even if you do that and you still think that you want to be able to make the changes for the large businesses, then give a phased approach, give some time for a small business to be able to adapt. We see this with Payday Super, another area that's going on at the moment. Again, for a small business, that has a cash flow impact. And so people just have to think about every day, can a small business actually afford to move money around as quickly as you want them to? It's just not that simple.
Yeah. I guess you touched a little bit on representing the views of small business. Does Xero see itself as, there's obviously lots of advocacy groups out there that represent small business. Xero represents, in a way, so many small businesses that use your platform every day. Do you feel a sense of obligation as their voice to policymakers and the part of the broader economy?
I mean, I think our vision and our purpose is pretty simple, which is to make lives better for small businesses, advisors, and the community they operate in. So if that's your vision, then I think we have a role to play.
Yeah, I think often their voice can get lost, and certainly part of the user-centric approach at Stripe is we have an obsession around getting user feedback and ensuring that is captured and fed back to regulators and to others.
And I think part of why it's important, small business is not like a homogenous thing, right? There's lots of them. They're in multiple different industries. They're of different sizes. And so there's a level of diversity. So it's important also not just say did it get one voice that represents over 2 million small businesses? Very hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, we're almost out of time. Don't want to stop people getting their sixth cup of ordinary coffee for the day. This time next year, what do you sort of see as the big topic that we'll be talking about?
I think AI will continue to be the big topic. I think, so I think it will permeate through everything. Will continue to. I think in a world of FinTech, I'm sure people are actively trying to understand how does the government look at regulation and policy in this space.
Does Xero have a particular use case on AI?
Again, it's really around minimising time and energy spent by a small business doing the things they don't want to do.
Yeah, like payroll. All right, we might leave it there, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to open up to the floor. Questions about surcharging, merchant fees, interchange,
Quality
AI,
of the coffee.
Productivity, what's that?
Give them a prod on policy.
Any questions from the floor? Last chance. Going once.
They're thinking of cupcakes at this point in time, Tommy.
Yeah. Was that a question?
I said they're thinking of cupcakes at this point in time, I reckon.
All right, we'll close it off there. Thanks, Angard. Really appreciate your insights and obviously